There is a place, buried inside American folklore, which is supposedly home to every scary thing you could possibly imagine. UFOs, poltergeists, werewolves. When you follow the current UFO story and the cast of characters within, follow it all the way back to the beginning, you will end up at Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker Ranch. And the ranch itself was owned by the Myers family for decades. Various members of the Myers family lived on the ranch for many, many years, at least 60 years. And then they sell the ranch to the Sherman family, Gwen and Terry Sherman. Now, the Myers family for decades and generations owned this location, owned this ranch, and never once see a UFO, report a UFO, see anything weird, see anything paranormal, nothing. They sell it to Terry and Gwen Sherman, and bam. Terry's talking about UFOs, strange things on the property, and a local newspaper, the Deseret News, writes an article about the ranch and this guy's alleged sightings. And a millionaire in another state, in Nevada, reads this story and says, I need that ranch. I need to go there and I need to figure out what's going on. I want to see these UFOs. And that millionaire was Robert Bigelow. So Robert Bigelow goes to the ranch, Terry and Gwen Sherman's ranch, and buys it. He creates the National Institute of Discovery Sciences, otherwise known as NIDS, and for the sole purpose of doing scientific studies of things like what was happening at the ranch here.
Next level.
Included on Bigelow's NIDS team were people like Hal Puthoff, who had spent decades researching psychic powers, both for the government in operations like the CIA's Project Stargate, and for the Church of Scientology, where he achieved the church's highest spiritual level. Puthoff had also worked with Uri Geller, who claims he can bend spoons with his mind. Puthoff was convinced Geller's psychic powers were real. Also on the NIDS team was John Alexander, a former Army intelligence officer who sought out how to harness the power of the paranormal for military applications. Alexander is featured in the critically acclaimed nonfiction book, The Men Who Stare at Goats, a true story about how the military performed a series of tests in which they attempted to kill goats simply by staring at them. And Jacques Vallée, a world-renowned UFO researcher who believes UFOs are not extraterrestrial, but multidimensional, originating from unseen dimensions of space-time. Vallée was Steven Spielberg's main inspiration for the French scientist in his film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
1 year after Bigelow purchases the ranch, the Deseret News, the same local paper, does a follow-up story where they talk to people who were working at the ranch for Bigelow. And the headline is, no UFOs so far, 1 year in. And they were like, yeah, we haven't seen anything yet. Like, the people who were there, they'd been there a year and were speaking to the press about how they hadn't seen anything, hadn't experienced anything, no UFOs, like nothing. And this was a year already into it. Nothing had happened yet. They hadn't seen anything. And so if you're following along, 60 years of no UFOs, the new owners are there like a month, and they're suddenly, they see UFOs. Bigelow buys the ranch of them because he's into UFOs. And then 1 year no UFOs.
In his published diaries, Jacques Vallée notes a complete lack of UFOs on the ranch. On January 12, 1997, 3 NID staffers told Vallée expectations of frequent sightings of UFOs at the Utah ranch have not materialized. So what are we supposed to work on? On May 3, 1997, Vallée wrote, "It must be noted that no UFO is being seen at the ranch, in contrast with earlier claims." And on January 11, 1998, he states, "The Utah ranch is quiet, with no new incidents. There hasn't been a single new case of a physical UFO there." And in 1999, Robert Bigelow is quoted in the press saying he still has not personally seen any UFOs, joking that anytime he comes to the ranch, the UFOs stay away.
And then everything, no more talking to the press. Years go by. Apparently, they're still at the ranch investigating. And then in 2005, this book comes out where it's like 280 pages worth of just the craziest stuff ever.
Written by NID scientist Colm Kelleher and paranormal journalist George Knapp, Hunt for the Skinwalker claims to be the chilling true story of unexplained phenomena on Utah's Skinwalker Ranch.
The book itself is a tell-all book of what they found, what they experienced at the ranch. And it is werewolves. It is poltergeist activity, UFOs, cattle mutilations. It reads like a science fiction horror film. And there is no appendix, no photos, no documents, just stories.
Lots of stories. Stories about Bigfoot-type monsters. Literal flying saucers landing in the backyard. Flying saucers and Bigfoot at the same time. Poltergeist hauntings. Ghostly voices of the dead. Hairy humanoids. People shooting guns at UFOs and the bullets ricocheting off the metal body of the spaceship. Quote, aliens, end quote. Interdimensional portals opening up and creatures crawling out of them. Ape-like creatures, reptilian creatures, beast creature, and a bulletproof wolf creature that couldn't be killed, no matter how many times they shot it. But no evidence of any kind to back up any of these stories has ever been presented. George Knapp, who's built an entire career around stories of UFOs and the paranormal, and who was one of the authors of the Hunt for the Skinwalker book, was asked about evidence on the Joe Rogan Show.
Because they weren't there with cameras.
Is there any evidence?
Like for the first 20 months when the rancher is there, they don't have any evidence because he's not a paranormal investigator.
At this point, Knapp begins telling more stories about UFOs on and near the ranch. Rogan then interrupts and asks again.
Again, is there any evidence?
No, not really.
Oh.
If you're looking for physical evidence and solid proof, and they don't have it.
Oh. Knapp saying there's no proof or evidence is quite strange, considering the book Knapp co-authored says this: "We obtained an intriguing body of physical evidence to support many of the accounts described in the book." Okay, so where is that intriguing body of physical evidence? Since this part of the Skinwalker story occurred now many decades ago, a lot of the early key witnesses have since passed away. But we are lucky that a record of their testimonies was documented by an objective source completely outside the Bigelow circle and uninvolved with Skinwalker Ranch. Frank Salisbury, a botanist with a PhD in plant physiology and geochemistry, wrote and published several books on plants and flowers. But stuck in the middle of his resume is a 1974 book he wrote titled The Utah UFO Display, a biologist's report. In 2010, he released a second edition of the book, this time including the Skinwalker story, and new, candid interviews with Myers and Sherman family members. Regarding whether the Myers family ever experienced UFOs or anything paranormal on the ranch during the 60 years they owned it, Garth Myers told Salisbury, "There were never any signs of that. There was nothing, unequivocally, absolutely nothing. There were no UFOs." Salisbury also interviewed Terry Sherman, who again purchased the ranch from the Myers, claimed to have seen UFOs, and then sold the ranch to Robert Bigelow for $200,000. Sherman was then hired by Bigelow to help with the Skinwalker Ranch investigation, and Sherman's experiences are a major portion of the Hunt for the Skinwalker book. Salisbury assumed, logically, that since Sherman's detailed accounts of paranormal activity are all over the book, that he had been extensively interviewed for the book. But as it turns out, Sherman didn't even know a book was being written about his family's experiences until the book was published. And he had never met George Knapp, although they had talked on the phone, but not about the book. Sherman basically supports Garth Myers' version of the history of the ranch. So where did the exaggerated version, the ranch as the center of UFO activity, come from? Well, that's a great question for the book's authors, Colm Kelleher and George Knapp, both of whom would not return multiple requests from me for comment. The 2005 release of Hunt for the Skinwalker catapulted the ranch's popularity on a national scale. Despite the ranch being closed to the public and guards prohibiting unauthorized entry, UFO believers would drive many hours just to sit outside the ranch's closed gates, hoping to see something. Many truly believed Robert Bigelow and his team of investigators at the National Institute of Discovery Sciences had discovered something that would change the course of human history forever. In 2004, in an announcement on the NIDS website, Bigelow stated his reason for shutting down active investigations at Skinwalker Ranch was simply, nothing was happening at Skinwalker Ranch. We have not had the need to do any major investigative work for well over 2.5 years. It is unfortunate that there isn't more activity, as there was in the past, that warrants investigation. However, he added, should substantial activity occur with a need for investigation, then NIDS will be reactivated with new personnel. Skinwalker Ranch was dead. The stories of aliens, werewolves, and ghosts had stopped. The scientists at the ranch packed their bags and left, leaving behind a giant mystery. But this story was far from over. In 2007, a scientist working at the Pentagon picked up Hunt for the Skinwalker, and he read it cover to cover. He was captivated, and he believed the stories could actually be true. And that's when this story really gets weird.